Hello.
What's up?
Okay.
So I think maybe we should decide on like two or three
Feels like he
things.
supports the
I would
Holocaust.
rather focus on things that most people don't know. So it's usually. So
Well,
I would like to speak a little bit about the early colonization in Israel, in Palestine, of Israel,
okay, yeah, sure.
and apartheid inside 48 Palestine, which is very little talked about, and Israeli imperialism.
Okay.
Of
Yeah, and
these
if
things.
if there's anything also that you think I got wrong, because I think you've seen some of my stuff, correct me,
Yes, I've
and I'll
seen.
yell at you.
It's okay. I don't really remember what you saw, but I think I saw some things that you were wrong, but mostly because they're like newer historical findings. So, for example, I remember seeing you saying that Jordan intervened to help Palestine, when in reality they had a secret agreement with Israel to just occupy the West Bank and never actually fight Israel and help the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
That is actually very important because the Jordanian army was the biggest and most better trained and better equipped Arab army in 48. But
Yeah.
because Jordan was mostly a British colony, so the Brits helped the Hashemite kingdom be made, and the Jordanian army was controlled by a British colonel, like British general. And all of the time during the 48 war, they were coordinating to split Palestine between Jordan and Israel.
Okay, yeah. Well, you're not going
Yeah.
to hear that on the Zionist stream, are you? Well, hold on. I gotta put some text on the screen so that people actually know that I'm talking to someone. I guess,
You
like,
can
just to
put my
represent you.
the image like the how do you call it, like the mushroom guy.
That's way too advanced for my stream skills.
It's okay.
Your name is
I also
Stalim. It's
Salim.
Stalim. Stalim. It's Arabic Stalin.
Yes, it's literally Arabic Stalin.
Stalim.
And if you don't
Feels
uphold
like he
Stalin, I
supports
also
the
do not support
Holocaust.
you. I do not condone not upholding Stalin. It's
Good.
very important to me. Okay, so I think maybe we can start with the early colonization in Palestine, because one of the main, we can say, myths that exist in the whole narrative, because there is a big narrative war between the truth and the Zionist narrative.
The truth in the Zionist narrative.
And so one of the main things that people say is Palestinians were selling the lands to Israelis, to early Jewish settlers, which was
Stalin.
the main
Beria.
thing of
Gulag.
the main way that early colonialism happened in Palestine.
Feels like he supports the Holocaust.
So I'm going to give a little bit of background about land laws in Ottoman Empire before, so we can explain how could the Zionists start and go to Palestine.
Okay.
So I don't know if people know, but the Ottoman Empire was not feudal. So it was a tributary state. So there were no feudal lords that were the owners of the land. They were like, normally the land was managed inside like the community, and different community had different way to manage the land. Some places had like more communal ownership, other ways had like divided in small parcels, etc. And it usually was mandated by like Sharia courts, like Islamic courts, or local courts, or like local strongmen. But when the Ottoman Empire, what they would do, they would collect taxes.
Yeah, so it was more like,
So
like, I guess sort of like Aztec sort of imperialism rather than like
I
European
do not
style.
know enough about, but it
Yeah,
was not
like,
a European style land division.
yeah.
This is important because a lot of people think that try normally project European structure to other places, which is wrong. So when the Ottomans started transitioning to capitalism because of the world transitioning to capitalism. One of the things they did in the I think 1850s, they created a new system for land registration, which was really resisted by the Palestinian farmers, because once you registered your land, your kids were like men were objected to forced conscription and for higher taxes. So after the land laws were done, there was a lot of under-registering of lands, mostly from poor farmers that did not want to pay more taxes and did not want to join the Ottoman army and go fight imperial war that they did not feel really represented by. So one of the main things that happened is rich tax collector or rich Lebanese and Syrian families registered a very big part of the Palestinian lands on their names. So basically what happened is like rich people from Beirut or rich people from Damascus were registering a lot of the lands. I think there is like one main family that is very famous called Sursuk, which registered the majority of the most fertile land. Like they registered them in the Ottoman Empire through their connections, and because they were like one of the richest family ever in the Ottoman Empire.
So obviously, while people were already living there, and who, you know, those people who understood that land to be theirs, right?
This is how the capitalist relations entered into the land in Palestine.
Yeah, sort of like enclosure, I guess, in a way.
Exactly. It's very similar when you think about it to the enclosure revolution in England.
Yeah. So like sort of primitive accumulation.
Exactly. So one of the main thing is that transformed the farmers and peasants. It didn't happen only in Palestine, but we were talking about Palestine. It transferred them from the owners of the land and like the people who manage the whole community to tenants.
Yeah.
To tenant farmers. So they had to pay like rent or part of their product to the new capitalist owner of the land. So one of the main things that happened is when early Zionism started to speak about immigrating to Israel and to Palestine and starting settler colonialism there, was the problem of getting the land. Because one of the laws that the Ottoman had is not allowing the selling of the land to foreigners, to non-Ottoman people. But with the time, the advancement of the time, the Ottoman went on liberalizing their land laws and stuff like that. So the rich families from Damascus, and mostly from Damascus and Beirut, started. I called the cities in the Arabic. And Damascus and Beirut started selling the lands to rich Zionists from Europe and the US. And so during a long time, especially at the end of the Ottoman Empire control of Palestine, the Ottoman Empire was refusing to displace the people. But they were doing it very little, mostly for any population who didn't register their land that was resisting the Ottoman Empire would get displaced. So one of the first places to get displaced is called Untele, which was a Druze village. So when the Druze in the beginning of the 19th century 20th century started rebelling against Ottoman Empire, they got displaced and their lands was given to Zionists.
And were these lands sold by these like rich Lebanese, etc., or were they sold by the Ottomans directly?
No, by the rich Lebanese and Syrians.
Yeah. So when we talk about like them buying land, we're basically talking about them buying land which was essentially stolen like a few decades earlier.
Yeah, it's like when you think about it, it's settlers go to, or rich people in England displace the farmers that were living there for like 500 years. I do not know, that thought about the land. They had like a different social relation with the land, which was common ownership, or the ownership system was different. And then rich or feudal lords were like starting displacing them so they could rent it to like more competitive lands, more competitive farmers.
Yeah, I mean, even still, like with what you said, Like, even if they had bought the land like legitimately, you know, there's one thing to buy land, another thing to proclaim yourself as like an independent ethno state because you bought some land there, you know.
So this is where we are going. We are getting
Yeah.
there. So that was the first type of settlerism in Palestine. So one of the main thing is once the Ottoman Empire falls and the British establish control over Palestine, so they create the British Mandate in Palestine in 1917.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's called. The British started enacting on all of the displacement stuff, like displacement orders they had for all of the lands that they bought. So I think I sent you
Yeah.
one of the things, one of the
Yeah, at
documents
least
I
the
sent you.
sources.
So I think one of them has like a table. It says like has a table of the lands bought.
Um,
So
is that Surstock purchase? Yeah, I'll check it out.
Sursuk purchase, yeah, Sursuk's purchase. So Sursuk is the family. It's one of the richest family in the Middle East up until today. They are like connected to British royalty.
Yeah, so these are like sort of like, you know, the equivalent of like Spanish land barons in Latin America, right? Basically.
Yes, they're more like I guess land barons in. So you can see it says there. So they bought something like 200 dunum. I don't know. It's a
Mm-hmm.
different land measure in from Turkish land measures, which is still
Yeah, this
used
one
in
has the
Palestine and
table.
Israel. The table is downstairs, like
Yeah, I have no
the.
idea what these land measurements are, but yeah, we have the table.
So you can see each village where it was bought, how many families were there,
Mm-hmm.
when what it was bought, and when what it was displaced. So the date is for the displacement.
Yeah, so they displaced like almost 2,000 families, basically.
Yes, this is before 1948, before the main Nakba, the main displacement. The
Mm-hmm.
settler IDs were already started by buying land from people who were losing their like access to land
Mm-hmm.
through a change in the system that no one really asked them about it.
Yeah, so sorry, just want to clarify. So when the Zionists were buying this land, they would buy it and then they wouldn't employ the tenants, they would just kick them off, right?
So this is a very important thing. The first time the first Zionists that came, they did not have this type of ideology.
Mm-hmm.
So it's called the first Aliyah. Aliyah is how the Israelis call for every time like a big wave of immigrants went
Yeah.
from Europe or North Africa or West Asia to Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
So the first Aliyah did not have this type of ethno-nationalist ideology, and they would usually still employ
Mm-hmm.
uh, Palestinian laborers because they were cheaper.
Yeah. Okay.
But the second Aliyah, when this is the important thing, was the labor Zionist Aliyah, which had a lot of people who were like pseudo-Marxists
Mm-hmm.
or chauvinist, like which is very, very common in Europe. And that time is like a very big racist or chauvinist labor ideology.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the main concept they brought is called the conquest of labor and Jewish labor.
Mm-hmm.
So under these two policies of Jewish labor and the conquest of labor, the Israeli or the proto-Israeli, the Zionist would try and only employ and would tell the backers, because all of this was backed from very big like capitalists in Europe,
Yeah.
Zionist capitalists like Montefiore from England, I think, Rothschild from France,
Yeah, there were
some American
could you
American
like could you like name
rich people.
the organizations or were the Zionist organizations not actually involved yet? Like the
So
big
I think
ones.
one is the Jewish National Fund,
Yeah.
JNF. There's I will tell you right now because I don't remember which one. So the conquest, but you can see one of the sources I sent you is also about the conquest of
Ah,
labor. So
yeah.
you can open it. It says a lot about it. If someone wants, I can later you can later like put it the
Yeah,
sources
sure.
somewhere.
If I'll upload this to my channel and then I'll put the sources in the description as well.
So, for example, one of the things they did as part of the conquest of labor, yes, Jadaliya. So you can see the names of the organization, but not that. Just that there's like some declarations.
Mm-hmm.
This is mocking the protest in 2011 about the cottage prices.
Oh, that's great. We have to go over that too.
Yes, we will. So down there you can see like yes. So for example, let's make it accumulate weight.
Sorry, just tell me what I should search for in the file.
So there's something called go a bit up. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So when Gordon speaks about here, this one, the Marxist labor Zionists abandoned Marxism.
Okay. Abandoned. There. So here, they abandoned Marxist class struggle. There.
Yes.
Okay.
In favor of Gordon mythical festival, the value of Jewish labor and the restoration of land and the revival of our people.
Uh-huh.
So basically what they would do is mostly just boycott any Jewish person who would employ Arabs.
Yeah. So
And they would
basically,
use...
suddenly
So this is...
introducing like sort of economic ethno-nationalism, basically.
Exactly. This is very similar to something, just to give an example, that what happened there is very similar for stuff like in South Africa, like the, I don't know, the Rand Rebellion, where white workers would boycott and strike against the inclusion of black laborer in the economic in the same economic spheres.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
basically fucked up. Like creating sort of apartheid by themselves.
but this is exciting. Israel, like proto-Israeli or Zionists, had really from the beginning. This is like very important because it's not normal immigration. Because normal immigration normally is has with the goal to assimilate into the place. So, for example, I live in Argentina. It's not like I try to only meet with other Palestinians and stuff like that, because I think the way to have healthy immigration is really to try and integrate into the society already existing.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you did, it's like there's a difference between having like an enclave in another country and trying to take it over, you know?
Exactly.
Like, you know, like every country has a Chinatown, but no one complains about it.
Also, the Chinese, it's not like they try to discriminate against everyone else.
Yeah, they don't want to proclaim like an independent Chinese state in the middle of the country. They just want to live there in their own community. You know, that's fine. It's very different.
So this idea, this what I'm showing is not just to show, it's just to show that there is like an history of ideological ethnocentrism and of exclusion and displacement of Palestinians. Just from the start, it's not about the war, it's not about an animosity from like the terrorism or anything like that. It's about the settler colonialist ideological project that is looking to create a home for the immigrants by displacing and creating a new economic sphere and a new economic life, and only for one type of people. It's like basic ethno-nationalism.
Yeah, clearly from the very beginning. Sorry, I have my neighbors are like doing construction right now. I hope it's not annoying. But
It's
yeah, go on.
So this is just so we can speak, because I think it's really, really important, because like one of the myths is like, oh, the only problem started when the Palestinians rejected the partitions. For us, this problem started when someone tries to settle your land, which is like very much before than 48 or even like 36,
Yeah,
when
clearly
it's like
like wow, you know, like 20, 30 years earlier already.
yeah, so it's the first people displaced, and the first place is 1905. If I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken. This is like, it always changes because it's very hard to get the historical detail, because Israel doesn't really like to publish.
Yeah, so
stuff.
this is like this is what they call like I obviously I'm gonna pronounce this totally wrong, but like kibbutz, right? Like
Yes, those are
Jewish-only
it's Moshava.
settlements.
It's Moshavas. The kibbutz are the later. They're part of them are kibbutz, but kibbutz was like the racist socialist.
Ah, okay.
I'm not kidding. There's a really big problem. It's really important to know that socialism, especially in the early part, especially in Europe, had a lot of racist elements into it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it did, but like, sure, but you know, usually when I think about it, like, I guess this is obviously non-Marxist socialism. Like, literally, it's like socialism for one ethnicity. It's basically,
Exactly.
we can call it national socialism.
That is that makes sense. I didn't say it. So just to give another example, the Israelis also created a union called Histadrut, which just means like the union, like the central general of workers.
Hmm.
And in the Histadrut, which is still the main union and one of the only unions inside Israel, at the beginning they wouldn't accept non-Jewish people.
Of course.
And one of the things they would do, for example, one of this very important, very famous case is there was a big, I think it was port or a railway project
Hmm.
for the British Mandate, where the Histadrut, together with rich people from the outside of Palestine,
Hmm.
low bid to steal the work from the Palestinians and subsidize the wages of the Israelis, so the Israelis won't have lower wages.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So it's
mean, it sounds like a sort of like informal apartheid, kind of, even before Israel was founded.
it was apartheid, but without the power of the state.
Yeah.
They were already establishing apartheid institutions.
Yeah, like just sort of economic power and like sort of yeah, like what you said, like different groups being formed, etc., to support it.
So a lot of the institutions that later are part of the Israeli state, for example, the Jewish National Fund, the Histadrut, and a lot of them are born in this context, in this way. So it's also, like I said, it's always very, very important to think about it like this. It's not to think, oh, there is war and people hate each other. It's all based on like material conditions
Yeah.
and access to land. And this it's access to land and access to work, which are like the main two ways of people surviving.
Yeah, absolutely. So
So I
essentially,
think
I mean, it sounds like to me basically like most of like the bourgeoisie were replaced with people who would only employ other Jews, and that obviously creates a massive problem if you're not Jewish.
exactly. It's also create massive problem for. So and a lot of the land purchases were really important and for breaking continuity of Arabic settlement of
Hmm.
Arabic places. So, for example, the Sursuk family sold Israel lands in my city, for example, and lands in what is called the Marj ibn Amr, which is like the most fertile part of Palestine. And of course, they were like making money, and they didn't care. Like this is what we call them collaborators,
Yeah.
because they were Arab and they prefer to like sell the lands to the settlers. So just to finish, so I think this is as the talking about the early Zionism. This gives like a really different image than the image of it was like the poor immigrants escaping anti-Semitism,
Oh yeah,
and
I mean,
especially it was true. A lot of immigrants were escaping anti-Semitism, but that does not give you the right. It's the same way that a lot of Protestants that were escaping persecution in the
yeah.
Netherlands or Germany or England did not have the right to go and colonize the New World.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Irish people, especially.
Well, Australia is really interesting because a lot of them were prisoners.
Yeah, they were prisoners, and then you know they got out of prison, and it was like, all right, time to take my 1,000 acres of land, kill me some Aboriginals. That's basically what they were like.
Okay. And so I think just this is good enough to give an image of the early Israeli settlement. So I personally am not going to speak. I do not debate Nakba. The Nakba happened. It was ethnic cleansing.
Mm-hmm.
It is not debatable. I refuse to debate that.
Yeah,
So I
there's
think,
no need.
yeah. So I think after that we need to speak a little bit about apartheid inside Israel,
Yeah,
because there is a big problem. A lot of people normally, when they speak about the apartheid in Palestine, they speak about the West Bank
yeah,
or Gaza.
yeah. Like,
But
yeah, I mean, like, I guess it's not well understood. Like people know generally, like, you're from the West Bank or Gaza, you live there. It's kind of like a Bantustan, but in Israel itself is less known.
exactly. So people know inside Israel, after 48 and the depopulation and the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, of the majority of Palestine from the Palestinian people, around 700,000, between 700,000 and 900,000 Palestinians were displaced. But
Mm-hmm.
100,000 Palestinians, more or less, stayed inside Israel. A lot of them didn't get displaced or were internally displaced. So here we are entering a very important thing inside the Palestinians. So we have difference between refugee, which are the people who were displaced from outside of Palestine or to the West Bank and Gaza. And you have the internally displaced, who are the people who got displaced inside Palestine but stayed inside Palestine. So for example, if you were in a village that got taken by the Israeli army, you went to another village that wasn't, and that village, when they ended the war, it was inside Israel.
Yeah,
You still lost your land, but you're not a refugee. It's a different status.
yeah. So lots of
Okay.
stuff to remember.
I'm sorry if it's get really complicated and stuff like that, because I
It's
really
just
wanted to speak about this because I
yeah.
think
No, no, it's great. It's great. Just my chat isn't very smart, so
being smart is for dumb people. So like I was saying, so I really want to speak about two really important laws that Israel did after the end of the war. So 48 happened. The majority of Palestinians are displaced. Most of them go to Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Gaza, and the West Bank, which is at that point were like Jordan took over the West Bank and Egypt took over Gaza.
yeah.
The Israeli passed two really important laws. One of them is called the JNF law, like the Jewish National Fund, which said that the Jewish National Fund is between the Jewish National Fund and two or other organizations. They are going to manage the lands of Israel, and they passed another law. It's called absentee property law. This law is very complicated. I'm going to really summarize it, which means is basically everyone who left his land or who was not a Palestinian and had lands inside Palestine, if he was not inside Palestine after the war, his lands got confiscated and was given to the what they call like an entity that was going to manage those absentee properties. Of course, absentee property later got really changed, and it was like money, cows, not just land, but it was mainly the land. It was like the main thing. It's always so important to remember. It's about who owns the land, who has access to land. Because Israel, because they want to have as least as possible Palestinian inside their borders, and those Palestinians that are there, they need to be as least dispersed as possible to have least access possible to lands. This is the whole idea of Israeli settler colonialism. Is the most you can summarize the most amount of land possible managed by Jewish people, and the least amount of land possible managed by Palestinians, and the most amount of possible of Jewish people inside Israel, and the least amount of possible of Arabs or non-Jewish people out of Israel, inside Israel.
Yeah.
So, but then Israel added another law or another amendment for the internally displaced, because they had a lot of lands that they still wanted to take from the internally displaced people. So if you were not present in your land, you were in present absentee. So basically, this way they took over something like 2 million dunum, I think. So I think it's like 0.1 acre.
Hold on, let me just convert dunum to acre. 2 million dunum. Yeah, that's 500,000 acres, it seems like. Or no. Yeah, 500,000 acres.
Once again, I could be really mistaken because I don't really remember the amount, but we can say it took over something like 93% of the land in Israel.
Yeah.
So one of the things I sent you, you can show this. It says about access of land. So before, so right now, Palestinians only control 4% of the land inside Israel. When before they had over 48%.
Yeah, and they're like, what is it, like 15% of the population? 20%?
20%.
Yeah.
20%.
So it's
just so you can
massively
think,
disproportionate.
yes, but just so you think, you can understand. From the existence, from the start of the state of Israel, there were 100,000 Palestinians inside, Palestinian citizens of Israel. Now there are 2 million.
Yeah.
And there was not even one single Palestinian city built or village.
Yeah, like not at
Or
all.
neighborhood. So what happened is all of the people have to live in really crowded spaces. And another thing they do with that is because they don't give. So Israel really discriminate. Not all of the discrimination is codified. A lot of it is like one of the inertia of the state. Because not all of the apartheid is part of the law. A lot of it is like really because who controls the state is acting apartheid because he wants to, not because the law says so. So, for example, Israelis do not give permissions for constructions or of new neighborhood and stuff like that for the normal population growth. So a lot of Palestinians have to build their houses illegally. So it's either, okay, you live with your parents in the same house, the whole kids and their families, or you construct a second floor that is illegal.
Yeah.
And after the first, second, third, fourth time they don't give you permission, you just build.
Yeah. And
And
what
then
happens
Israel
if they find out?
They demolishes.
Oh, and then they take it.
No, they demolish it.
Oh, they just demolish it. They don't take the land, they just demolish it.
They demolish it and you go back to live with the same amount of land or amount of space.
Well,
So, for example, house demolitions inside Palestine, they're a very big problem. Very big problem because because people will build. People, if you don't give them permission, people will build equally. You know, you live in Argentina, the visa became like this.
yeah. So hold on, just a question. Are we talking here about demolitions inside what is called Israel today, or
Exactly.
in Gaza and West?
Inside what is it's the same thing they do in the West Bank, which is very famous.
In the West Bank, they do it as reprisals, right? But in Israel, they just do it because they can.
And not just, so in the West Bank, they do part as reprisal, and a very big part is because, you built on state land, which is doesn't belong to any state.
Yeah, obviously.
Legally. Or you built without permission. It's not like this is, how do you call it? Agricultural land, because like the Ottoman, because so basically they use the same Ottoman land laws.
Yeah.
Which are from like 150 years ago.
Yeah, so just like looking, they love their demolitions, don't they? They love whatever excuse they can find.
Yes. That's like that. So this is like a lot. For example, my parents met in a demonstration against demolitions.
Wow. So it's crazy that they just like, I've never, honestly, there's no country in the world that is so focused on destroying people's houses as Israel.
Yes, Israel really does a lot of demolition, and a lot of it is really vindictive. So, for example, they will destroy your balcony just because they can, just to make your life hard.
Yeah, and I'm sure these laws are never enforced on Jewish Israelis who do the same things.
For example, all of the things they built in outside of some places in the West Bank are not legal, and they will never get displaced, the settlers, or almost never get displaced. So just to give a really interesting case, because and I want to give another because it's very interesting. So a lot of times there's a very big misunderstanding. I know you don't have it. I hope most of your chat doesn't have it, which is, oh, the problem is Muslims against Jewish people, and the war is from 200,000 years ago. I don't know. No, they do not like each other, which is very clearly bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, it's just people who like want like an easy answer. Oh, just a conflict from 2,000 years ago. Nothing new about it.
So, for example, one of the most famous cases of internally displaced is from Ikrith and Bar'am, which are two Christian villages. I think I sent something, but it's in Hebrew, unfortunately.
Let's see.
Maybe you can run it through the Google Translate. So just so you people know exactly what it is. So those are two villages in the north of Palestine who, during 1948, were declared. So it is the same thing that Israel does now in the West Bank. They declare a place closed military space, and they made the people leave. So the people from Bar'am and Ikrith mostly went to the villages around. But the Israeli, it's not this. I sent you something in Hebrew. It's should be a Wikipedia. I'm sorry, that's Wikipedia, but this is, if someone wants, this is all of the depopulated villages in town. In Palestine, Badil is a Palestinian research center that collects information and shows the places that they are. So this is what?
How is this allowed? Why are you allowed to say bad things about Israel on Hebrew Wikipedia?
Israelis don't really lie as much to themselves as they lie for the outside.
So in Hebrew, it's all more honest.
So, for example, you can see the really important thing is the High Court of Israel gave them the permission to go back in 51. You can see.
Yeah.
Petition High Court, and the High Court issued an order to allow the people to go back. The Israeli army and government refused, and on Christmas 51, the Israeli blew up on Christmas the church in Ikrith, and blew up the village, the houses.
Yeah.
And ever since then, there have been a very big legal battle because there is a decision from the High Court from the 50s that people can go back. But I really important thing is the last part. The last part, I want you to read it for the people.
Okay.
Like go down, the last part of the Wikipedia.
The very last paragraph.
Yes.
Okay.
So it shows like when the judge.
I think my translation doesn't really make sense. So if you could translate it.
So wait, I will open it. So basically, what happened is a couple of years ago, like 20 or 30 years ago, I don't remember. There was a court in the High Court, an Israeli High Court. There was the case of wait. But I need to open it so I can read it better.
Yeah, no worries. Don't worry. We have these people won't leave. They're simps.
Oh yes. So there was a case between the government, the government and the High Court, and the 97. Here it is. It says so. The Palestine. So up until now, so people understand how Israelis prevent the Palestinians from going back is they declare it closed military space.
Even so though like there is no law.
No, so Israeli law, one of the laws Israel has is the army, because Israel has no constitution and there's like so many emergency law that give power to the army.
So the army can just like appropriate whatever they want.
So the army can go and decide that some space is a closed military space. I actually sent the law. It is one of the laws I sent you in the.
Yeah. And with that, like, do they still let Israelis settle there, like Israeli Jews, or?
No, this place is not settled by Israeli Jews. But for example, in the West Bank, they do that. They declare a place a closed martial place, and the Israeli Jews go and settle there, and they never get displaced.
Yeah, it's
so, for
like
example,
just enforcing the law for one group and not for another, or the law, obviously it's bullshit justifications made up to take land.
So, but it's very important for people to know that sometimes the apartheid is codified, but a lot of time is because who controls the state? Not everything is in the law; it's systemic. But I'm trying to show like the most egregious parts of Israeli apartheid.
Yeah.
So anyway, the villagers, the Palestinians said that there is no security reasons. And there is a promise from the government to do this. And then the government, in that point, I don't know if people know Ariel Sharon.
Yeah.
He was the
he was the prime minister like 20
prime
years
minister.
ago, right?
Yes. So what he said is the people cannot go back. You can see it. It's like the statement, the two. Number two, the state does not keep a government promise. The state has the right to not keep the government promise if circumstances so require.
Yeah, he basically said, like, from what I'm reading here, like, that they don't have to give it back because it's needed for security or something, basically.
No. So this is where the Israelis say the truth. They said we cannot give it back because if we give it back, it gives legal grounds for right of return.
Okay. I was reading too low. Sorry, the quotes are all messed up. I guess it didn't translate well.
Yes.
Yeah, the displaced cannot, in practical terms, settle in the villages. The state's right not to keep a government promise if circumstances so require, and in the light of Ariel Sharon's statements on the danger that the return of the displaced may constitute a problematic precedent in terms of the right of return. And then, they say because of that, the government should not be forced to keep the promise. Okay, yeah, basically just outright saying it.
If we give Palestinians their land back, we are admitting that we are stealing land.
Yeah.
So they admit
very
it.
Very similar. I mean, this is like classic English sort of common law colonial precedent where they would just selectively enforce legal precedents until the point where all of the precedents favored themselves, and it was like, oh, cheerio, chaps, our own legal system justifies our colonialism, so you have no recourse. It's like exactly the same.
So for me, I do not know a lot, but for every time I read, for example, about South Africa or about Canada, I know about settler colonialism in Canada. It's all very, very eerily similar.
Yeah, it's like these sorts of laws, and stuff like this. It's, they're very concerned with making sure everything is legal within their own system, but in a very performative sort of way, just to sort of make the international audience happy and stuff,
It's not just that. It is important it's really important for them to really stay on the good side, because Israeli knows that they really depend on outside support.
Yeah, they need to have some, even if it's fake legal backing, they can't just go around doing whatever they want. They need to have some sort of rubber stamp on what they do.
In general, in liberal societies and in advanced liberal societies we have now, they really, really like to do this whole legal charade and legalistic charade around exploitation. Not just
the English
for,
have been doing it forever. This reminds me of, there was this sort of landmark legal decision in the 19th century in Australia, which basically said, if, it's exactly the same thing. If we acknowledge that this group of Aboriginal people had the right to their land rather than it being ours from the beginning,
communism is based,
then that will set a precedent that none of the land is ours, so we can't do it. The judge straight up said that. It's exactly the same.
Exactly. So this is just one. This is the most famous and egregious part of Israel, of case of internally displaced people, where the government promise to go back, where the people are trying to go all the legal ways, and where the people are really saying we are not, we are. You can see like the last thing is like from this is a really Israeli thing, where the judges always feel bad about what they do.
Like, do you think they legitimately feel bad about it, or like they just sort of say they do?
They feel guilty. I really do think that at some point they feel guilty. So they say, "Oh, we understand why it is happening. When the situation between Palestinians and Israeli are better, maybe we can consider allowing the people to return." It's like the last, like they leave like as the asterisk at the end of the. Oh yes, you don't have to give the people the land back. Well, maybe when we are all friends, magically we can give them their land back.
Yeah, like just trying to come up with whatever bullshit they can. It's typical sort of. This is like the typical sort of settler colonial legal justifications. It's incredibly similar.
This is what I want to show. This is not special for Israel. This is not about. This is a political project that has been copied from other people.
Yeah, like you can see this. It's like, the example I just gave. The exact same sort of things happened in, like, the British didn't just steal land whenever they wanted. They tried very hard to justify it, like, legally, and this is the same sort of thing. Obviously in a very bullshit way, but they still tried to justify it.
So this is just a show, for example, how Israel is apartheid on the access to land right now in Palestine, inside Israel. So when people tell you that there is no apartheid because West Bank people and Gaza people are not citizens, which is also really bullshit.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how do you call, for example, for the West Bank, how do you call the institution? Institution, the political institution that controls register births,
like the birth,
takes taxes, and controls your border and trade.
Yeah, it's all Israel.
It's your state.
Exactly, like, and just on the citizenship point, in South Africa, black South Africans had their citizenship stripped, and they were made citizens of Bantustans.
Exactly.
So it's the same situation, even if we accept that as the only possible standard. It still applies.
And even if that was true, there is still, even if there are two states, Israel is still apartheid for the Palestinians inside Israel.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it would be like some fucking American arguing that, oh my god, the construction's going on, but like an American arguing that like a reservation is like autonomous or something during the 19th century in the US, when it's obviously not. It's obviously under the US government's ultimate control. Anyone
the Texas
can see.
Republic when they seceded from Mexico.
Yeah. So, and just so people know, there are a lot of laws in Israel that show that Israel is a racist state, is an ethno state. I'm going to name some that people will see. This is not about just the West Bank or just Gaza. So, for example, if a Palestinian from inside Israel marries a Palestinian from outside Israel, they cannot live together. So, for example, if I marry an Argentinian girl, I can take her to live in Israel. I am an Israeli citizen. Yeah, even if she's not like Jewish, doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter. If I marry you, because it's legal here, I can take you to Israel.
So if you're Israeli, they don't have gay marriage there, do they?
No.
So you have to get married somewhere else. That's funny.
Yes. They also don't have interfaith marriage.
Ooh.
So, for example, I have a couple of friends, like a couple that are friends. So the girl is Muslim and the guy is Christian, and they had to go to Prague to get married.
But once they do it somewhere else, it's okay. That's so fucked up.
Yeah, it gets recognized. Israel recognizes marriages from other places.
Marriage tourism, that's fucking ridiculous.
Yes. A lot of things are ridiculous because of Israel. In Israel, they have really ridiculous stuff, like they grow pigs on ramps because pigs cannot touch the land. Stuff like that. So anyway, so like I said, so if I marry a girl from Ramallah, which is in the West Bank, I cannot bring her to Haifa, which is the city I'm from.
So it's specifically for Palestinians then, only for Palestinians.
Exactly. It's specifically for Palestinians. And the same if I marry a Palestinian from Jordan, which is a country that has peace with Israel, and Jordan is mostly Palestinian people, like something like 30-40%. They are the biggest minority or the biggest group in general. So this is one. Another one is wait, I have like the list. And those are laws. For example, you have the Jewish national law. So basically, what people say that Israel is a normal state, and that a lot of the states are ethno-nationalist or ethnocentrist, which is really big lie. So first thing, there is no Israeli nation, because this is like a decision from the Israeli Supreme Court. They don't believe in the Israeli nationality. So Israel is only the country of the Jewish people.
Yeah, the nation-state law.
Nation-state law. So the nation-state law states that nation-state is only. This is, you can see there's like there's like a summary of the main provisions. You can see them there. You can see alone it is. They had like a list of 5 or 10 lists. You can read it and see how this is ethno-nationalist.
Yeah, like it's saying you know. Basically saying we don't have a civic nationality, we have an ethnic nationality, which is Jewish.
Exactly. So a lot of people always say, oh no, but it's the same as in Italy, where only Italians are the Italian people, but everyone can become Italian.
Yeah, anyone can become Italian, right? But according to this, like, yeah, you can become Israeli, but that's not the same thing as being like, you know.
You cannot really become Israeli if you're not Jewish also.
Oh yeah, that's true. But yeah,
so
it's like completely different.
Exactly. This is really, really different. It's about an ethno-supremacist nation law, which does not exist, for example, in places like the US, or even where the places where people usually think about the nation states, where the nation is the same as the ethnicity in Germany, for example, where it's usually the same thing. The German people and the German state refer to the same thing, but there is a German nationality, which is different from German ethnicity.
Yeah, like people don't get the distinction, right? Like, you know, you can be ethnic German and not be a German national, or you could not be ethnic German and be a German national. It's the same thing. I just want to like go over the articles here, so maybe people want me to, but like, you know, Article 1 states that the land of Israel is the historical national home of the Jewish people, in which the state of Israel was established, and in which the Jewish people exercised its natural, cultural, and historic right to self-determination. It adds that the right to exercise national self-determination in the state of Israel is solely for the Jewish people. Very explicit there, right? Article 2 sets forth the symbols of the state, which must all specifically be Jewish in character. Article 3 defines the capital as Jerusalem, which includes occupied East Jerusalem. Article 4 states that the official language is Hebrew, demoting Arabic, which was previously a second official language. Article 5 establishes that immigration leading to automatic citizenship is exclusive to Jews. Article 6 provides that the state will strengthen ties between the state and Jewish people around the world. And Article 7 provides that the state views development of Jewish settlement as a national value and will act to encourage, promote, and consolidate its establishment, thereby instituting segregation as a new legal norm and allowing for the annexation of the West Bank.
But Article 7 is really important because there is a lot of big campaigns inside Israel on what they call Jewification. So, for example, the majority...
they use that word themselves.
Yes. This in Hebrew, I'm translating from Hebrew, which is, for example, the Jewification of the Galilee, which is the part where most Palestinians live, if I'm not mistaken, inside Israel, where the Jewish National Fund and the Israeli government encourage people to go settle there because they see it as a problem that there are too many Arabs concentrated in the same place.
So is it just like an attempt at like a demographic shift, or do they do more? Like, do they try to remove Arabs from there as well, or?
Well, the way to try to remove people is by making their life hell, by not allowing for natural growth of settlements, When I say settlement here, I mean like where people live, not settlement in the settlement
By chance,
sense.
do they use like a term like Jewification of the land, or
It's called Yehuda Galil, which means Jewification of the. For example, Hagalil is the region, and they have the same the Jewification of the Negev, Naqab, which is in the south.
Yeah, it's just that the Nazis used the term like Germanification or something like that, specifically
Wait,
regarding a similar sort of thing.
I will send you I will send you like Judaization. It's called in English Judaization. I will send it to you, and you can see the neck. I sent you. You can open it.
Yeah, it's weird. Like how they call it Judaization. I guess that's more correct in English.
Yes, I'm sorry. I am not a native English speaker.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, Jewification is what you would expect it to be if grammar and everything was logical, but it's not.
So you can see it. It's a regional policy of the Israeli government to associate private organization.
Yeah, basically like.
And this is
trying
now,
to dilute the population because there's too many Arabs.
Yes, so they see it as a problem when there is a lot of people with like a big concentration of Arabs living in like and taking in the Galil. In the Jalil is very, very important for them because most of the Arabs are in small villages. So it's a little bit of people with a bigger part of land, which is really the anti-Zionism. So, and another really, for example, this is a plan that is right now. I also sent. You can see it. It's called ongoing ethnic cleansing.
Okay.
One is called unrecognized villages.
Okay, which one? The first one, unrecognized villages. Okay, I'll bring that up.
So, for example, now in the Naqab, so it's the south of Palestine, where in the Naqab live the most. Oh, this is. I think you need like a premium opener or something like
that. It seems to be working for me. Oh no, you have to get full access to Haaretz. So if you can just read or whatever.
So okay, it's okay. What I really wanted to show. So what they're doing now. This is a new plan from the new government. So you can just say terms make it. So look at the first one, like the Israel plans to recognize 3 Bedouin villages. Welfare group says term make it impossible. So I don't know if people know, but a couple of months ago there was a new government in Israel, which is supposed to be the new leftist and non-bad government with the inclusion of like the Arabs.
Yeah.
So there, just to give some, so this is part of where one of the terms of the new government was I'm looking for the word. So there is regularization of the Bedouin villages. So the Bedouins, who are a nomadic people, before the creation of the state of Israel, did not really have the land registered or anything like that, because their style of life was different from the sedentary people who were like working the same time. So they were like really roam around the desert, depending on where there is better situation for them to like sheep or camels. I don't really know about the economy of that. But so once Israel took over, all of the Bedouins, they stayed in the Naqab, but what they have now is called unrecognized village. So what happens? Like really small villages which have no connection to water, electricity, and stuff like that, because they were like never connected by the Israeli state. The Israeli state legally does not allow for them to be connected to services. And the Israeli state is trying to make the people become sedentary. So what they gave as the regularization is, we're going to make, instead of really a lot of small villages, we should also go back to what I was saying before. We are going to regularize 3 villages, make them like mini cities, but the people need to sign that they're going to leave 70% of the Naqab land.
So they're going to give up 70% of it then. They have to.
And even better than that, this is like, this is the plan. and they want the people, before they do actually plan, they want the people to sign that they are going to accept it before they know the terms.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you know, everything that you tell me, I see like a parallel in other colonialisms. Like, for example, what the US did with reservations, you know, they tried to put Native Americans onto much smaller reservations and force them to take up farming so they didn't need so much of their land. Ergo, the Americans could take more of it.
Just so people see what is to be someone from the Nakabs, you can open the second thing about the ongoing ethnic cleansing from the things I saw. The one that says Al Araqib, and you can just read the. You understand. Just read the headline.
Oh my God. Israel demolishes Al Araqib village for 184th time. So this is
I
like,
was there.
so they just
I
like,
was there at least 3 times when it was demolished.
wow. Well, it's like a fucking event then. People go to see it be demolished? What the fuck?
No, people go to protest.
Oh, it's like, holy shit. So amazing. Wow. This is honestly like, just looking at this thing, it's like, imagine if there was like a government somewhere that just demolished shanty towns every time someone tried to build a little house somewhere. It's like that, except for specific ethnicities, basically. Similar, at least. Like, it's insane. 184 times. Yeah.
Just so people understand, this is not West Bank. These are all Israeli citizens whose houses are being demolished.
Yeah, because
These
say
people were
it's
there
state
before
land.
Israel.
They say it's state land. You know, there's just this empty, completely empty space where no one else lives. It's just state land, so they can just demolish their village. You know, great example of how bullshit laws are.
Israel does that all the time. Every time they want to demolish a place, they say, "Oh, it's state land," or "Oh, it's closed military space territory, and we can get the people out."
Yeah, it's like making people's lives hell to try and basically make them fuck off, or at least stop.
Or stop, or reproduce less, or
Yeah, just
because let's say I want to have a family. If I know I cannot have a house, maybe I'll have 1 kid. If I know I can get a house and I can build and something like that, I can have 5 kids.
yeah. I mean, this is like very modern sort of colonialism, right? Like, it's like a more like a colonialism that's very sort of conscious of like this so-called international community and keeping up appearances. So it's very peculiar in what they're doing. It's like sort of like a, you know, fucking 20th, 21st century development of what you would have expect to happen.
So just is so people understand once again, this is very, very like ongoing process.
Yeah.
Ongoing process. For example, in my neighborhood, I used to live in Haifa. I now live in Argentina. I used to live in Haifa. In my neighborhood, I was living there for at least 22 years. There were at least 5 times where the whole neighborhood had to go out and protest against house demolition inside Israel, inside a mixed city.
Yeah.
Where demolitions only happen in 2 neighborhoods, or 3 neighborhoods, which are the Arab neighborhoods.
Yeah, so they just like look for like whatever building fault they can find and be like, we have to demolish your entire house.
Yes. Or, oh, you built this balcony, now we have to demolish the whole top floor.
Yeah, it's like insane. Like, God.
Okay. I think I established apartheid in 48 like proof.
Mm-hmm.
Or even be like beyond needed proof.
Yeah.
So, and now we need to speak about a different thing about Israel, which is really important, which is Israel is ethno-nationalist, not just against Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
Israel is ethno-nationalist against basically everyone who is not Jewish, but especially against people from the third world.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, in Israel, there are a lot of refugees from Africa,
Mm-hmm.
mostly from Eritrea.
Mm-hmm. And are those Eritreans, are they Jewish or no?
No. They're mostly Muslim
Ah,
or
so
Christian.
so they're taken as like part of like the obligatory refugee quota.
No, they walk from Eritrea to Israel because Israel is a
Ah,
first world country. People need to understand that Israel
yeah.
is a very rich country.
Okay,
So this is
so they're just sort of migrants who go directly to Israel, refugees who go
refugees.
directly
They're
there.
not they're refugees
Yeah,
because I don't know if people know about Eritrea,
yeah. So
but
instead,
Eritrea
yeah, so instead of going to like trying to get to Europe, they go to Israel.
because it's easier and you don't have to go through the Mediterranean.
Yeah,
And because they are not Arab, because Arab will not go to Israel because Israel they know will not allow them
yeah.
in. Which is the most of the refugees from all around the Middle East are Arab or Arabified people. I'm sorry,
Hmm.
it's like a lot of them are not Arab, but for the Israelis they're the same as Arabs. So if you're like Kurdish Arab speaker, you're an Arab in Israel. Or
Yeah,
if you're an Armenian Arab speaker, you're an Arab
hmm,
in Israel. So a lot of them are from South Sudan and Eritrea, mostly Eritrea. So I don't know if people know, but in Eritrea they have a military dictatorship with
yeah,
indefinite military law, a military
yeah.
service. So you have to go to the army from you're 18 until you're like the army releases you. So a lot
Yeah.
of people really escape from political persecution and from slave labor conditions because of what they send the army to work for, like agriculture or construction, stuff like that, without paying them.
Hmm.
So one of the first thing is Israel did the border wall. They did what Trump wants to do, and Israel has a border wall with Egypt.
Yeah.
But even more with that than that, Israel has really good connection with Eritrea. They have a military base there,
Hmm. Oh,
and
so
Israel is all the time trying to deport Eritrean back to Eritrea, which is really illegal in international
yeah,
law. You cannot deport refugees without their agreement, and you cannot deport them for sure to the country where they came from.
yeah,
And so, one of the most famous cases, I think I sent it to you,
yeah.
is
I think I have that one.
so the Israel court acquits man who lynched Eritrean
Oh, that
refugee.
one.
This is amazing, actually. This is like it's one
Oh,
of the
that
worst
title
things.
is like
It's cursed.
the biggest lie I've ever seen in my life.
What?
Court acquits man who lynched Eritrean migrant they
Man,
mistook
what, more
for
than one.
men. Migrant they mistook for terrorist. Um, yeah,
So this is what they do. This is like a really good example of how Israel is a ethno state where you can lynch someone if you think he is Palestinian.
yeah. And I mean, this guy does not look Palestinian. Come on.
He's Eritrean.
Yeah, like it's obviously like just like they see anyone who isn't who like is a darker shade of brown and it's like Palestinian apparently.
This is crazy. So this is really shows how. And the really bad thing is not just the lynch. It's like, oh, you think he was a terrorist, so it's okay if you beat him up and kill him.
Yep, it's like acquitted. I thought he was a Palestinian. It's over. You know, he supports the Holocaust. It's fine. So they just completely acquitted. Nothing wrong. Amazing stuff.
So this is how Israeli ethnic nationalism really works. So, for example, a lot of Israelis really think that they call refugees one of the most really they do is like they call refugees cancer because and they have like really a lot of the same. Oh, the refugees are coming and they're going to reproduce with our daughters, and we are going not to become Jewish anymore. And this is a
Hmm.
problem. And this is the same thing they do with against mixed people. Like if Palestinians go out with Israelis, they do the same thing,
Hmm.
which is really really big. Like
Yeah, they are very obsessed with blood quantum, aren't they? Very
yes,
Nazi-like in that respect.
this is when you know that you need to maintain majority of one race to justify your existence.
Yeah, it's absolutely absurd. It especially doesn't make sense because you're Jewish if your mother was Jewish, so it doesn't fucking
Feels like
matter
he
if they steal
supports the
your woman.
Holocaust.
But they don't want to be Arab. This is very
Yeah.
important in Israel. So Israel, for example, a lot of the Jewish of Arab origin, what we call like Mizrahis, they really have Israel really did a big number on them to really hate their Arabness.
Yeah.
So, and even inside Israeli society, there are very racist between them. So I really like it's like Israel is Jewish for the Palestinians and Eurocentric for the Israelis.
Yeah.
This is how I
Crazy.
think about it. There's like really a
There's
racial
like
pyramid.
multiple layers of racism going on, different kinds.
There's really a racial pyramid where it's really weird sometimes because, for example, a lot of Israelis don't like Palestinians, but in general terms, they think about, maybe the Palestinians are better than the Ethiopian Jews who are black.
God.
It's stuff like that. Not all of them, but so for example, I know I used to do labor stuff in Palestine. So, for example, the people who get their rights violated the most, as like not paying minimum wage, are Jewish Ethiopian women. So even inside the pyramid, inside the Israeli society, if we exclude Palestinians, they're really racist between them. And I think it really has to do with the racial construction of the country. You cannot just be racist against one person. If you're started with racism, you become racist against almost everyone.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to, for example, the U.S., where there were like different levels of white people, like like Anglo-Saxon, Germanic people, and then like Italians and Irish people, etc. Even worse, actually.
It's even worse because it's really persistent up until now.
Yeah.
And in general, Israel is a really segregated society, like really segregated.
God.
So yes, I'm seeing that in your chat they're sending about like the
Yeah.
sterilization of Ethiopian Jews.
Yeah. I'll bring that up.
Then they did something. They also I do not know if they also kidnapped Yemeni Jewish kids because they wanted to Europeize them.
Oh, so yeah, the Nazis did that too to Slavs who needed to be Germanized, at least some of them. God, it's like every single little thing you tell me has like some sort of colonial precedent or very big,
I
basically
think the
is
only
like
things they really innovated in Israel are the new things. Because there's like the only settler colonial state that is still active at that level.
Yeah, it really seems to me like the way that they've innovated is in a very peculiarly modern way, like where they need to keep up appearances a lot for the international community and stuff that colonial states didn't need to do before.
This is why Israel really has a really big like propaganda machine. Because they know this, they are not stupid. This is what I tell people. No one is stupid there. Everyone knows what they're doing because everyone knows what is materially beneficial to them. So they know they need to keep the Americans on their side. They know because without the US, they're like days are numbered.
God, it's crazy. Well, Palestine will win eventually.
I actually do believe so. I am, for example, I'm also a communist, but I am much more optimist about freeing Palestine than communism.
I mean, it gave me optimism what the anime fascists said, like, oh, we can't have a one-state solution because there'll be too many Palestinians. Makes it sound like she knows it's going to happen.
I want to speak about what she said. Two things she said I think are very ridiculous, are very really easy to disprove the lie. First thing is that there's no room.
Oh, there is room, obviously. I mean, we just saw that picture that you showed me of like the town that's been demolished 184 times. Seems like there's a lot of room there that's just empty.
Well, it's not empty. It's
emptied. Yeah, it's been empty, but you know what I mean. There's no room. Maybe there's no room because they're like specifically trying to exclude people from being able to live in these places.
But if Israelis, because she said, "Oh, I am not speaking about myself. I am speaking about what the normal Israeli says." Right? She said that. I remember. Am I remember correctly?
Yeah.
So if there really was a problem with the room, they would cancel the immigration law. Israel has a law that says every Jewish person that lives outside of Israel can go and live in Israel.
Yeah.
It is almost the same amount of Palestinian refugees and Israel and Jewish people living outside of Israel. If there really was no room and Israelis didn't want, I think it's like 8 million and 9 million Palestinian and 8 million Jewish people.
Yeah.
If there really was no room, then Israelis would campaign against that law.
Yeah.
Logically, if I really think there's no room, I also don't want rich American people coming, or French Jewish people, or I don't know, like Argentinian Jewish people, but they do want them to come. So the space is not a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's not
This is
space, it's who they want to have in
really
the
easy
space.
to disprove that the motivation is not about the space; it's really racial.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously racial. I mean, she practically admitted that multiple times. And then
Yeah,
came
but
up with an excuse
I
for
just
it.
want to disprove even those like small caveats people use. Oh, there will be a full.
I mean, there's no space. It's such a, like, come on, how can someone say that in front of an audience that has
You
ever
can
heard what the Nazis were and not be like, wow, she said that. Come on.
And also, people live, and much more people live in one city at there is could enter 5 times inside Palestine. Like they're a city with more people than in Israel.
Yeah, it's obviously Palestine is way more population dense, especially Gaza.
Yeah, but Gaza is not the same because Gaza it's population dense because it has a lot of refugees.
Yeah.
And the other thing she said that I really, really don't like, and I think it's a good segue for the next section, is Israel is not rich. So I do not know if people know Israeli minimum wage is above American minimum wage.
Yeah. I don't
And
know what
Israel
her
is
definition of rich is.
what?
I don't know what her definition of rich
Israel
is.
is one of the richest countries in the world. I know. I used to live there, and I now live in Argentina. I know the difference.
I mean, obviously it is. I mean, you just look at like GDP per capita. What is it? 43,000. That's like what? The same level as like fucking Switzerland, Sweden, etc. basically.
They're like one of the top 20 countries in the world with GDP per capita.
43,000. That's I think it's like Portugal, Spain level, which is obviously rich.
But it's really, really a
No,
lie
it's double
because
Portugal.
and it's also really a lie because you need to think 20% of the citizens are Palestinians, and they had really little part of the wealth. So if you look at the poorest people inside Israel, they're all Palestinians or Orthodox Jews.
Yeah. So she like tried to make the argument that like settlers go to settlements because they're just so poor, when the poor people aren't the ones who are settling, you know?
There are the Palestinians who are the people who cannot settle.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is really and now the segue to my second to why is Israel rich and even richer than a lot of European countries when all of the other countries in the region are really, really poor? How did that happen? So here you need to really understand the place of Israel in the global economy. And why all of the, like, for example, France and Britain and Germany and the US, why do they support Israel? Because once again, we are here, I don't know, I guess we are materialist. We do not believe, because they were feeling guilty about the Jews or something like that. But the bourgeoisies of these countries, they saw a really good benefit from having a state that was really dependent on them and really part of their imperialist project. And in the Middle East, where they were really afraid of Arab nationalism.
Yeah.
So the early Arab nationalist project really planted one country for all of the Arabs, which would have been really, really rich because a lot of people and a lot of natural resources, most of the petroleum in the world. And if people look at Israel geographically, it's really important because it is divided North Africa and the Asian part of the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really between what is the connection of all of the Arab world is Palestine. You can see it on the map. It's really so it's really, really important place to see.
Yeah, clearly. So it's rich
very
off imperialism.
Yes.
And you want to talk about Israel's involvement in imperialism too, right?
This is what I was going to say. So Israel not just get support from the US in buying arms and stuff like that. They also get a lot of preferential treatment in trade agreements and placement in the global value chain. I don't know if people really know what that is. But for example, Israel's two biggest exports are arms, like military and technological military industrial complex, and they process diamonds.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, the same way that Canadian settler colonialism is really, really connected, and Canadian capitalism is really connected to the extraction and processing of minerals, especially in Africa and Latin America. I know about their involvement really with death squads in Colombia.
Yeah, quite. And you have a bunch of links here. Should I bring any of them up?
Yes. So Israel is not only really has advantage of economic development, they really export arms to dictatorships. This is one of their main things. They export arms and expertise to dictatorships. The most famous case is, of course, the Maya genocide in Guatemala.
Okay, I'll bring that one up.
Yes, it's like Israel proxy war. It's from NACLA and NCLA.
Yeah.
So just to give some background, I don't know if your followers know. In Guatemala really was the worst of the Latin American dictatorships. Really, really the worst, where they really did a very big destruction. So here you can see the February 1983. If you can please read it so people will understand what they did.
A February 1993 program reported that Israel didn't send down congressmen, human rights activists, or priests to strengthen Israel's special relationship with Guatemala. Israel taught the Guatemalans how to build an air base. They set up their intelligence network, tried and tested on the West Bank and Gaza, designed simply to beat the guerrillas. And the Guatemalan army built outposts that were basically near replicas of Israeli army field camps. At one of these Israeli outposts in an area that was the hardest hit by the genocide, Colonel something pointed out that his troops are using Israeli communications equipment, mortars, submachine guns, battle gear, and helmets. And the army chief of staff said, the Israeli soldier is a model and an example for us. And this is all in the middle of a genocide where they killed like a minimum 100,000
You can see up that they say that they would set up white Guatemalan kibbutz. I think up it says, just look, Control F kibbutz.
It doesn't show up for me. Must
Wait.
be another article.
Yeah, I do not know because I was looking at a lot and this is like the best. So a lot of the places, no, just if you look, wait, maybe I can open it myself. Anyway. So a lot of people do not know, but Israel really had like developed an anti-subversive way that is also really connected to taking parts of the land and doing agricultural projects there. They also did the same stuff in Colombia, the same type of program. But in Guatemala is really, really important because in Guatemala it was really specifically a racist genocide, not just against communists, but against indigenous people. And the state had really, we want to kill the Indians.
Yeah.
Okay, the guerrilla kill Indians because they were collaborating. So really, Israel, not just there. So this is the biggest example. But for example, you live in Argentina, we live in Argentina. So in 77, the Israelis, the US government blockaded the Argentinian arms cell. And after that, Israel was selling something like 30% of their arms to the Argentinian dictatorship.
Yeah.
And the same thing, one of the most famous... yes, the same thing happened in Salvador.
Yeah, it's like,
same thing happened all over Latin America. You really need to understand. For example, in Colombia, they have factories of Israeli arms factory and airplane factories to supply the Colombian army. And I don't know if people know who Carlos Castaño is. So Carlos Castaño and Salvatore Mancuso, they're two of the founder of the AUC, Autodefensas Campesinas, which is the most bloody and crazy paramilitary group in Colombia, which is saying a lot because Colombia is one of the worst places hit.
yeah, there's
by
like a million
violence.
paramilitary groups there.
What? Yeah, but no, he was one of the main ones in the 90s and the 80s, which is like the height of the like Colombian death squad era.
Yeah.
So he was a rich Colombian son of like a land-owning family, and when he was 18, he was sent to do a course in the Hebrew University and with the Israeli army on organizing counter-insurgency. Before he was famous paramilitary. So Israel really has a really big connection with the right-wing governments and organization all over Latin America. Not just Latin America, of course. Myanmar. They were one of the main arms supplier for the Myanmar government that was massacring, genociding Rohingya.
And are they still now?
No, I think they in the 2018 they had a really big scandal because of it, and they had to stop selling arms.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
So
just,
because of now you see how if you criticize them, they no, we didn't know that they were doing a genocide. We're so sorry, we will not sell them arms anymore. But in Latin America is really important because a lot of the places where what would happen is if the US would do an arms embargo on a country, then the Israeli would supplement all of the arms.
Yeah, Israel would step in and it's basically like, functionally nothing
because
changes.
The US knew that. The US knew that.
Yeah, so they just, it's like, we need to stop looking bad, but, Israel, no one's going to care if you give them guns.
And it's really not just guns, because what Israel has and why Israel really needs the occupation really from economic side is Israel really, a lot of their economy is based on testing weapons and ways of oppression on Palestinians and exporting them.
Yeah.
So for example, there is a really famous NSO. You heard about Pegasus.
NSO, Pegasus, that doesn't make sense to me. What does that mean? Oh, spyware.
Yes, exactly. So this company, the people who made it, they were like intelligence officers in Israel. And in Israeli society, this I forgot to add, there is really a lot of people want to go to work in Israeli intelligence because they know that later they can work in high-tech cyber security firms. And this is really a big part.
Isn't it funny
of their
how,
economy.
Yeah, everyone's always talking about Russian hackers and stuff, but what about Israel?
And this is really a big part of their economy of, we need to test new weapons, and we need to test new ways of spying on people. So, for example, their biometric and AI and images, because they take a lot of photos of Palestinians.
Yeah, they sell like biometric tech to China, don't they?
I do not know about that, but it doesn't really surprise me.
Yeah. Something like that.
They do not care. They sell it to everyone.
Yeah.
And they even don't care if the US don't sell to China. They don't care because they're making money.
Ugh.
And for example, a really, really good example of how Israeli really a lot of times, especially in their international relations, they don't really care about Jewish people, is in Argentina. I do not know if people know, a very big proportion, like a unproportionate part of the people disappeared were Jewish people. I think it's like 5,000 out of the 30,000, which is really not of the proportion of Jewish people in Argentina, which shows that there really was anti-Semitic dictatorship in Argentina.
Yeah, absolutely. The dictatorship like believed that Israel wanted to form like a new Zionist state in Patagonia or something, like some ridiculous
This is a
conspiracy.
lie. They were like always selling arms and buying arms from them. And
that's the thing. That's the thing. Like the dictator, like a lot of, for example, a lot of Jews who were tortured reported that the soldiers were like, "Oh, what do you know about the Jewish plan to steal Patagonia from us?" Like they unironically believed that, but at the same time, the dictatorship was dealing with Israel in arms.
So, and more important than that, so a lot of people who were trying to escape the dictatorship, what they would do is especially Jewish people, is they would go to the Israeli embassy and ask to help escaping. And Israel would refuse to help really like leftists. Oh, he is too leftist, we don't want him.
Yeah.
And wouldn't help him. So they were not save every Jewish people, is save the Jewish people who we think won't make problem inside Israel. Because if they're too leftist, they might become pro-Palestinians, because there are Jewish pro-Palestinian people inside Israel who the sons of immigrants and sons of Zionists who saw what happened and they side with the right side.
Yeah.
And even like a lot of Palestinian organizations where I was active, they allow Jewish people as long as they are against settler colonialism. Is for the one side, no one cares.
Yeah. Wow.
And just so people see how it is up until now. So, for example, there is one torturer from an Argentinian clandestine prison that is now in Israel, and Israel is refusing to extradite him. Yes, you can look. His name is Aníbal Gauto.
Yeah.
I think I left a link about it.
Yeah, this is like from 3 years ago, and he's still there.
Yes, I think this year my parents went to the demonstration.
What
against
grounds
him.
was he given citizenship in Israel? Like for being Jewish?
Oh, he's married to a Jewish person.
That's it. Nothing more. That's crazy. Like he's not even Jewish himself, and they still don't deport him. Crazy.
He killed like family members of Israeli citizens.
Yeah.
So the person who did this is like, I think he killed his parents or uncle or something like that. The person who found him in Israel.
Well, maybe he should just kill him and say that he thought he was a Palestinian terrorist.
I don't know if people know Sudan. The coup in Sudan a couple of days ago, weeks ago. Israel supported that. The ex-government of Sudan, they said that Israel and Sisi and Egypt supported the coup in Sudan. So Israel knows that they cannot allow any democracy in the Middle East because Israel has much better. And this is like the government people. Israel knows they cannot have any democracy in the Middle East because once a country becomes democratic, it will be like Lebanon, where they have a very big portion of the population that is armed is against Israel, like Hezbollah. So I was looking a bit at the chat, and people are like, "Oh, Israel also did this. Oh, Israel also did this." I know Israel was involved in almost every like right-wing dictatorship you can think of.
How can we possibly fit them all in?
And I think this is more or less what I wanted to talk about, what I feel like people really, really miss with all of the other bad stuff Israel does. I didn't even speak about like how every time they're even more racist, the Israelis, and stuff like that, but I think it's a lot. I was talking for more than an hour and a half. Oh my God, so bad. I don't know if you have any questions or...
No, I think I asked you most and added what little I could to that. But yeah, very informative. And when I upload the clip of this, I'll put all the sources in the description. And what's your Twitter handle so I can shout you out?
So my Twitter handle is at Valery Sablin ES.
Yeah, I don't know how to type that. You got to type it to me on Discord.
Yeah, I will send it to you.
And then I'll put it in the chat. So we'll shout out my friend. Oh, Valery Sablin, obviously. That's Spanish pronunciation. How could I not understand that?
Sorry, I've been living in Argentina for almost 7 years and in Latin America for 2 years more.
Yeah, I mean, I should have understood that.
So I am really like, I have more the Argentinian accent than even Palestinian one.
Perfect. Entonces,
thank you very much.
Háblame en español. En español.
No, pero después no van a entender nada de estos pelotudos.
Sí, son todos pelotudos. Discúlpame.
Aunque creo que sé que algunos tipo mexicanos están mirando eso.
Sí, tienes razón. Los míos son todos gringos de mierda, yanquis, que se piensan especiales por ver un stream de alguien que supuestamente sabe del mundo. Bueno, son inferiores. Sus fenotipos no son buenos.
Especialista en foreign policy.
Sí, como Dylan Burns.
Me bloqueó hoy.
Bueno, sí. Well, now you've seen what it's like to be on a stream, and I hope it's your last one for your own sake.
Once again, I really do not condone, really do not condone streaming. I am against streaming. Streaming is bad and wrong, and the internet is bad and wrong.
I completely agree. I'm a degenerate.
But for me, it's like a really good opportunity.
Yeah.
To say stuff that people really do not know.
I mean, absolutely. Don't worry. Like on my channel, this is probably going to get like 10,000 views. So you'll
this is
more attention to these things.
Even if I'm betraying all of my ideas and like principled.
Mm-hmm.
I am categorically against the internet. Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. No, thank you very much for giving me ad revenue. Thank you.
Oh yes, if people are already simping, they need to simp for me.
Well, just don't start your own stream. I beg you. If you did, I'll tell you right now.
A good job, so I'm okay.
Yeah, it's good. But like, if a English-speaking Palestinian started a stream on Twitch, it would be like a hit right away.
Oh yes, I do not want that. I will get like assassinated.
Yeah, so better not.
So for example, I just so you know, and I already told you that I try. For example, in my internet presence, I try not to speak a lot about what I think about the organizations, because there really is a big persecution of Palestinian presence in the internet, where you get arrested. I know people who were arrested for like YouTube videos, Facebook posts, Twitter, stuff like that.
Basically, you can't speak unless you never intend to go back.
Yes. Because I always say that I probably the Shabak know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really like, for example, if I want to speak about Hamas, I will never say what I think.
Mm-hmm.
I will say
just don't even mention the word. You never said that. Redacted.
No, there is a right to self-defense, and there is a right to defend against occupation. This is an international law.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the basic right of the human being to fight against who is oppressing him. Israelis don't want to fight Hamas. They need to stop oppressing.
Mm-hmm. Well, now that you said that, you better never go back.
No, it's okay. This much they know. Okay, thank you very much, and have a nice day.
Thank you very much. It was awesome. Thank you so much.
Goodbye.
Bye. All right, there we go. Palestinian Chad, Stalium.